In this video, we'll look at the function question type. So the function question type allows students to enter a mathematical expression, like a variable expression, or an equation, and get graded on it accordingly. So let's go ahead and draft up a sample question. So maybe we say something like, what is the area of a square whose side length is x units? So the answer to this is x squared. We'll go ahead and quick save and preview, and we get the text we're expecting. So what we need to do is define the answer accordingly. So the answer to this question is x squared. So for our answer variable, we're going to give a string with a mathematical expression that we want to be the answer. So in this case, we do x squared using the notation we use when we write out our math, or what students enter into the input box. So if we quick save and preview, we get this answer box that we can enter x squared into. So if we enter x squared, we should get correct feedback. We could also do x times x. It's an equivalent one. And we submit it, and we get correct feedback as well. Now, on the other hand, if we change some things around, so if we change to x to the variable s, we change that up here in the comment control, and we save that, now we want the area of a square whose side length is s units, and that should be s squared. However, when we enter that, notice that the preview is yelling at us. It says syntax error, you might be using an incorrect variable. This is because by default, iMathAS is going to use x as the variable, and unless you specify otherwise, it's expecting it to be x. So to handle this, we define a variable called variables, and we give it a list of all the variables we want to use in our answer. So in this case, we would do variables equals s. And now if we do s squared, we shouldn't get yelled at. And we submit that, and we should get points for it. So if you want to use variables other than x, you have to state them explicitly using the variables variable. Now let's modify this a little bit, and let's suppose we want to write a formula. So maybe we delete all of this. I'm just going to write some dummy text like write a formula ... expressing a in terms of s. So maybe we're asking the student to write a formula expressing the area in terms of the side length. I'm just abbreviating some stuff to speed things along. So now we want our answer to be a equals s squared, but like we already mentioned, we need to indicate a explicitly within our variables list. So we'll add a to that just by doing s and then comma a. So now if we try this out, our answer should be a equals s squared. We type that in, and we get a preview error again. You gave an equation, not an expression. Now this is happening because by default, iMathAS expects an expression for this question type. If you want to allow students to enter an equation, what we need to do is be explicit about that. We need to say answer format should be an equation. So we do answer format equals equation to say, hey, I want students to enter an equation here. So now if we quick save and preview and do a equals s squared, our syntax is okay. We can submit this, and we're good to go. Now, one thing to point out is students could enter s squared equals a and submit that, and they're going to get credit for it. If you wanted them to explicitly enter a equals and have the a on the left-hand side of the equation, we have to do a little extra work to force that. So there's an option to essentially add extra constraints on what answers are acceptable. And this is useful for a lot of things, like if you want students to rewrite an expression using some kind of algebraic technique, things of that nature, we need to add some constraints here. So there's a variable called require times. And if you want to use this, I really encourage you to go read up on the writing questions help about this. But if we do require times, this allows us to add some constraints to this. So the general format of this is something for the system to look for. So we want an a equals, and then some kind of constraint on that. So we want that to be equal to 1. We want to find exactly one instance of a equals. So if we save that and preview it, we get a equals s squared. That gets counted as correct, but s squared equals a is not counted as correct because the system did not find an a equals exactly one time. So required times allows you to add some extra constraints. It might take a little bit of practice getting used to this, but you can add a list of other constraints that you want to see within the correct answer.